NRA reformer Phil Journey explains his latest attempt to intervene in the group's corruption trial. That and more on this episode of the Weekly Reload Podcast.
No, the devil's got no hold on me.
All right, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the Weekly Reload Podcast. I'm your host, Stephen Gutowski. I'm also a CNN contributor and the founder of thereload.com, where you can head over and sign up for our free newsletter today if you want to keep up to date with what's going on with guns in America. We are brought to you this week, again, by the Dispatch. I'll have a little message at the end of the episode from them and telling you a little bit more about that publication. But in the meantime, to get into the meat of what our show is about today, we will be talking with NRA board member Phil Journey about his latest attempt to intervene in the New York civil corruption case that the NRA is actually, the second phase is starting the day this episode goes public, Monday, July 15th. And so this is kind of something that you've done here, Judge Journey, that is maybe going to throw a bit of a wrench in the proceedings coming up. But first of all, welcome back to the show. I appreciate you coming on and give us your perspective.
Thank you so much for having me, Stephen.
And can you just tell people a little bit more about your background before we get into the details of what's going on with this case? You know, who you are, how you got involved with the NRA and all that.
All right. Well, I started a long time ago. I went to my first NRA annual meeting in 91 in San Antonio. I got on the board of directors of State Rifle Association in Kansas, and then kept going to the meetings, got to know Neil Knox and a couple of the other guys on the board. Ran in 94 by petition, didn't quite make it. The next time I had the nominating committee's endorsement. I was elected to a 3-year term, went through the battle in Seattle in 97, and then did not get reelected to the board in 98. Then we went to we kept going to annual meetings, my family and I, and I'd hang around and go to the board meeting and, figure out what's going on, see if I can help in any way. And I went to the meeting in 2019 in Indianapolis, watched the complete thing melt down. And
that's where we first met, actually.
That's right. And that's when I started talking to my friends on the board that, had been on the board all this time. I had not. And, explained, hey, I'm a judge now. You guys are in a lot of trouble. I'd be more than willing to help, help me get on the board. We'll help make this right. And Sandy Froman was the friend I was talking to, and she ended up being chairman of the nominating committee, and she just kept my little folder under her arm. And she got in a lot of trouble for that. And then, for what she did there. And then I got elected to the board again for 3 years. I was on the board from 20 to 23, went through all that folderol in 21, the very first board meeting in January of 21. Then we did a couple things. We created the special litigation committee and then approved Wayne's contract. And nobody said anything about bankruptcy or mentioned Chapter 11. And then, 8 days later, they filed the bankruptcy. I'm upset because I think I've been lied to again. I was hoping that when I came back on the board, I'd actually get a straight answer out of staff. Woody Phillips never gave me a straight answer. Back in the 90s, never. Anyway, and so I got on the board, found out what was going on. It was worse than my wildest dream, nightmare, and did what I could, raised the money, hired the lawyer in 2 weeks, and filed the first motion in the bankruptcy, which was to appoint an examiner based upon what I'd read in the New York Attorney General's petition. I was really concerned because it connected so many dots for me. It told me that the corporate culture was one of corruption, and I couldn't fix that.
Mm-hmm.
But
and then fast forward a little bit here.
Yeah,
you were found to be a whistleblower by the jury in this New York civil case after the bankruptcy failed. They went back to back to New York, and they've been going through this civil trial ever since then. The first phase ended. The jury found Wayne LaPierre, Woody Phillips, like you mentioned, were both liable for millions of dollars worth of money that they'd inappropriately spent on themselves, NRA money. And they also, as part of that finding, part of that ruling, they found that you were a whistleblower who was retaliated against, and the NRA did not protect you as it's obligated to by law. You got back on the board because you weren't renominated after that first 3-year term, right?
No.
And so you ran by petition on a reformers platform with 3 other board member candidates. You all won. You're back on the board now. We're headed to this.
One resounding.
Right. And we'll get into that because that was, you guys won. There were leadership elections where the people that you backed, most of them won leadership positions. But here we are back right before the start of this second phase of that civil trial. And you've seen fit to email the judge and say, I want to intervene as a separate party or represented separately from both the NRA and the New York Attorney General's office, because you don't feel like either one of them are representing you or NRA members correctly.
Yes.
Why is that?
Well, when I watched the run up to this second phase of the trial, looking at the court documents filed by both parties, nobody was talking about what's called the 715B violation for whistleblower. And so I had to do a lot of research with that. And it was something that was rather frustrating because as we got through the election and we went to the board meeting in May at the annual meeting in Dallas, and then I went to the new board member orientation in June, it became clear to me that they have no intention of correcting their past behavior. I wanted to give them the benefit of the doubt. I hope that the jury, which spoke loud and clear, gave them the direction they should have gone, and they have definitely decided not to. Charles Cotton is at the heart of all of this problems with NRA. He was president for 3 years. He was acting president for another couple of years because Carolyn Meadows seldom went to the board meeting because of health reasons, although she was at the last one. And he's at the heart of all of it. And President Barr, that was the one race we didn't win. We were running Owen Buzz Mills for president. That's the only race we really lost that mattered. And he has still not appointed any of us to committee, except today he just appointed Rocky to audit committee. But all the other committee slots that are the 5 committees that he decided today, the rest of us didn't get any so far. I'll probably be on range development again or youth programs or something that's not working, because they don't have the money to make it work. Anyway, it became clear to me that they were going to run an ethics complaint on me like they did back in the 90s on some of the board members to get them off the board and then get me booted off the board by that process. And as long as those people who are intent on continuing to punish me as a whistleblower are there, I'm always going to be at risk, and they will continue their abuse without restriction. As soon as this case is over, I'm sure my life changes on the board.
Okay. So, because we had you on a couple of weeks back, right? After the elections, the leadership elections, and
yes.
3 of the 4 top leadership positions were filled by reformers other than the president position, as you just mentioned there.
Yes.
And you seem pretty optimistic at that point. But you're saying now that your outlook on that has changed so much that you feel the need to intervene in this case and hope to get a sort of third way option for the judge. Is that what your goal is?
Okay. So as I understand it, with the research that I've done, there's not a specific statute that gives me a right to cause of action, but there are New York cases that say there should be a private right because so employees can bring it. And I think so it should also be for board members to bring it. And so we'll see what the judge says about that. The reality is that that's really not high on the Attorney General's list of things they'd like to accomplish in this trial. Their number one goal is to get that financial monitor in place. And that seems to be about all they were arguing about until about a week ago after I filed my motion. Some filings have been filed by the New York Attorney General that gave me some hope that they would be in my corner on this topic, because if they do not fix this culture of corruption inside, they're just going to end up back in court in a year or two with the same problems, assuming NRA survives that long.
Right. And I do want to get to some of the things the AG is recommending as part of her filings for the second phase of this trial. But first, let's talk a little bit more about, I guess, the internal dynamics going on at the NRA and why you felt the need to take this particular path. Right. So one complaint, as you mentioned, is the lack of committee appointments for you and the other reformers. The 4 for Reform was you guys ran on the 4 different candidates. Rocky Marshall is part of that. He has been appointed to the Finance Committee, but the rest of you, the other 3.
Audit. He got on.
Audit.
Yeah.
The other,
should be on
the other
finance.
3 of you haven't. And additionally, you've been highly critical of former President Cotton. He's on almost every key committee from audit to ethics to finance at this point, right?
That's correct.
And that's a big part of it. But there's also a handful of other complaints that I think you had mentioned that you're in the email you sent, the letter you sent to the judge. You claim that the Special Litigation Committee, which controls, I guess, the legal strategy for this case and other cases related to the NRA's administration, that you didn't think the new members of leadership had been swapped out with the old members of that committee. Can you explain that a little bit?
Okay. So the Special Litigation Committee is a committee that's created by the board. It did not say how members of the committee would be removed or replaced in that resolution. So they defer to the bylaws, which says that the president has the power to appoint and create committees, even though this was a board committee. And I think that's a flawed analysis because it's a board created committee. It named 3 people to it. It takes board action to change who makes up the committee, which I don't believe has happened even when I was gone. I got all 3 board books, the minutes from the 3 board meetings I missed because I wasn't on the board, and reviewed them. And I still haven't found a resolution that changes the membership of that committee. So in theory, right now, it's apparent that they are operating as if Bob Barr has complete control over who's on that committee. And it's him and Cotton and one other that are now on SLC. I want to say Coy, but I'm not 100% certain on that. They pulled Willis Lee off when he wouldn't go on board with some crazy plan they had. And he got kicked off the committee and put to the back bench, and he wasn't very happy about that, but Cotton did that for him. I think that it's pretty clear that the board should be able to fix that the board members and the officers should recognize that this is a new day, that with the outstanding results of the election, that we honestly have the members' mandate. And there's no doubt in my mind that if we did not have the SLC and Brewer attorneys on our running this case, that we could probably settle the New York AG case, just like we settled the one with the Washington, D.C. Attorney General and the NRA Foundation. And that would save millions because Brewer's going to bill us every minute of that $1,400 an hour he charges, which I think is ridiculous too. And, we're going to be upside down, I'm afraid, very soon.
Okay. And so I had, obviously I reached out to the NRA and to the Brewer firm for response when I wrote my piece on your letter. And they also, of course, responded with their own letter to the judge that's in the docket that got into a bit more detail on some of the claims that you made, which they're vehemently denying all of these things. They say Barr is working on making the rest of the appointments, that they're not being held up. Because part of your claim in the letter was that he's not just keeping you guys off these committees, but he's doing it intentionally to try and shape how you're going to act in the second phase of this trial, right? That was part of the accusation that you made, correct?
That's been their modus operandi since before the bankruptcy. And these leopards will not change their spots. And it's tragic. I didn't want to do this. I would be happy running my little docket here in Kansas and helping Kansas families figure out what to do in divorce or paternity cases. But, I'm back there for 2 weeks now. They're going to put me at the end. They just told me where they're going to put me in the lineup for the witnesses. The New York AG did. And, it's the same strategy they had in the first phase of the trial. It didn't work with the jury. It's not going to work with the judge. He's seen so much that I can tell by looking at his statements on the record with this motion or that hearing that I think they're going to have about as much success as they've been having in the other cases.
Okay. And we'll get more into some of that legal strategy in a moment as well. But to circle back real quick for the denials on the part of the Brewer firm and NRA, that you also had the new first vice president, second vice president, the candidates that you support. They weren't part of the forfeiture form, but they were the candidates that you backed in the leadership election. And they claim that the SLC, what you said about the SLC wasn't true, and that they support the NRA opposing your entry into the case. What is your reaction to that?
I understand they're trying to survive. They don't know what's going to happen in this case. And, they've got to work with the people that are there. And so, they're doing, my personal feeling is that nobody's told me anything to give me this, but I think it's just expediency, that they're given the answer that gives them the less trouble. They're trying to take the path of least resistance to reform. And I appreciate that.
Okay. But you don't believe that the SLC the members have been changed to this point?
No, it has not. No, it's still the same old guys.
Okay. And then one of the other big asks that you had for the judge was the removal of the Brewer firm. You just got into a little bit of why you don't trust them or you don't like them. And so one of the things you would like to see the judge do is remove them from being able to represent the NRA, right?
Yes. And there's good grounds for that. The 715B violation, the whistleblower violation, that they did not protect me from the harassment that followed, comes from that bankruptcy motion. And the board meeting immediately after the bankruptcy filing, which was in March of 21, the lawyers, not another board member, the lawyers got up at the podium, and it's all co-counsel with Brewer and Company, got up in the podium and pointed at me and said, "This is the greatest enemy of NRA." And then it all went to hell after that. I tried to explain what I did. And of course they shouted me down. And then when we got out of executive session, I tried to do a point of personal privilege. And of course they called on me, and then they called me out of order because I was talking about the lawsuit outside of executive session. And I was talking about things they did in executive session, like point at me and tell everybody on the board that I'm their greatest enemy. So that's their violation. The lawyers participated in it. They orchestrated it. And they're still doing that. Don't forget that Brewer and Company are also a vendor inside NRA, doing their PR work, replacing what Ackerman and McQueen used to do. So they're more than just lawyers for the association. They're actually on the payroll. And so that causes a clear conflict of interest because they're actually in there defending themselves.
Now, they also claim, beyond the fact that they say, you don't have any, that the NRA selected them to be the representative, the outside law firm. They also claim that you don't have essentially standing to bring this request for an intervention. They're arguing, you alluded to this earlier, but they're saying that the statute doesn't apply to anyone who isn't an employee, that only the Attorney General can bring the sorts of claims that you're trying to bring with this intervention. And also that it's coming way too late in the game. The trial is starting less than 2 weeks after you emailed the judge. The second phase of the trial starts to begin, and that would prejudice the NRA because they've been preparing for the AG's claims and not your claims. And what do you make of those responses that you've seen from?
Well, I think that it's clear that they don't want to be responsible for their actions. And, you know, I would appreciate it if you would just post that document on your website so people can read it for themselves. Because I go through it and explain it line by line, what the law is. And there's an appellate case that said there was a private right. It was implied in the statute, even though it wasn't expressly stated, and that it applied to employees. And that case went up and it was certified on the appellate process. And that is actually the law. And the reality is that if the legislature implied that right for an employee whistleblower, they should also be able, it is congruent to say, oh, board members too, because it may be that the board member finds out about it and not the employee sitting there working in the trenches. And so I think we've got a very valid argument on that point. The timing issue, my defense is really, this is because of what they did, not because I had this right and I wanted to exercise it, but because what they were doing to me after the members meeting and after the board meeting, when I was sworn in, it was clear to me they are going to continue doing what they have done to me. You know, you got to remember that I've been watching this for 30 years. You know, I went through the much bigger problems NRA had back in 97 at the battle in Seattle when they brought, Wayne was in a lot of trouble. Wayne was in really deep. And what he had done is he'd violated board policy repeatedly, which said that if there's a $100,000 contract in writing, it has to be approved by 2 executive officers, the president or the 2 vice presidents. 2 out of 3 had to approve it. And he just made all the contracts oral. And they would just send a bill based on the oral contract, and he'd just tell them pay it. And there wasn't a written contract to review, so he didn't need to show it to the officers. And that's what he got caught doing. The same kind of twisted logic we see in some of Brewer's arguments too. And so we were very close to removing him from office at that time. The fight on the board was much more serious. And, you know, Wayne brought in Charlton Heston with the help of Tony Macris, and they made him first vice president, and he defeated Neil Knox by 3 votes. And then the second vice president, we lost that one too. And then in every subsequent board election, they got the guys out. That some of them quit because they didn't want to put up with it. And I understand a lot of people have quit after 19 also from the board. And I'm the only one ostracized that ever got back on the board from that 97 battle.
Yeah. But so I guess bottom line, you're still hopeful that the judge is going to see things your way and allow you into this case, right?
I hope so. One thing that I was criticized for in their pleading also against my motion was that I didn't name names. Well, the truth is I don't know, because I don't know what evidence the judge has seen. And that's why I asked in the alternative, if you don't let me join, at least let me watch the hearing and then make an argument to you about what I would like to see happen and who I believe needs to be removed from the board, because that's the only way you're going to get rid of the culture of corruption.
Yeah, but this judge has previously rejected attempts for NRA members to intervene.
And Rocky when he was on the board.
Yeah, right. And so, he's been hesitant to do that. He's talked about wanting to hear the perspective of NRA members or, differing points of view. But the NRA is a very large organization, right?
They haven't got a mechanism set up to do that. He wanted that, but the 2 attorneys didn't, the 2 sides didn't cooperate and make that happen.
Right. So, it does seem like a big ask to have him do this, especially like you mentioned, the specific relief that you sought, and at least in the last paragraph of the letter. And look, both your letter and the Brewer firm's response to it are linked in my story on this. So people should read it themselves. Great. Absolutely. For more detail on it. But, it is fairly vague. It says you want people, the board members who are resistant to reform or to transparency to be removed. That's
not quite how they phrased it.
I'm just paraphrasing what you said. Your request for relief was, as you mentioned, it wasn't extremely specific as to who should be removed exactly. So why, it seems like a bit of a long shot, doesn't it?
It's a shot I had to take. There's a principle in the law that's called Racejudicata. That if it's already been decided, you don't get a second bite at the apple. That when the jury found that I was a whistleblower and the statute was violated, that's what makes my request unique from the two previous requests to intervene, because I now have a right, a due process right, to be able to tell the court what I would like to have happen. Because while I don't get a financial windfall like an employee would under that violation, I do have a right to equitable relief. And that it would add injunctions. And that's what I want to enjoin. I want to use the power of an injunction to prevent Brewer from representing NRA any longer, and to enjoin others from serving either as officers or serving as board members.
Okay. And you're not confident the AG is going to make those same sorts of requests for relief?
I certainly wasn't at the time that I filed the motion.
Are you feeling a bit better about it?
There have been subsequent filings that did make me feel a little bit better about it. But, I have to move forward or I won't get to sue them because it's already been decided that they've had this violation. I can't file my own lawsuit. I have to come into this one. And that's where the joinder is.
Okay. Yeah, sort of a last chance thing here. But so speaking of the AG's filings and some of the things they're looking to get from the judge in the second phase, one of them is they filed this fairly detailed plan for a court-appointed independent consultant, I think is what they call it.
I'd call it a special master. He's like a mini judge. He's like a mini judge. And basically, he would report to the judge, hey, you ought to look at this, if they're up to their old shenanigans again.
Right. But they lay out in pretty good detail some of the asks for this consultant or what they want them to do, and also some of the limitations that would be placed on them. And a number of the things that they ask for seem in line with some of the stuff that you've been looking for over the years. For instance, they want reform to the board. They want to make it smaller. They want to put term limits in. They want to rotate out current members over a period of time. They want to bar Wayne LaPierre from ever working for the NRA again in the future. I think Woody Phillips has already stipulated that he won't work for the NRA.
That's what the press reports say. I haven't read the plea agreement.
Yeah, that's a new one. It doesn't. They just filed that the other day, where essentially he agreed to the one aspect, which is not working for the NRA or other nonprofits chartered in New York, at least for a significant period of time, or without taking remedial classes. They didn't agree on the Woody Phillips's charge. The jury found that he took or that he had a lot of monetary damages to the NRA that he may have to pay back. That part they didn't agree to, but the part about not working for the NRA anymore, he agreed to that. They want that for Wayne LaPierre as well, and they also want John Frazier, the NRA secretary and former general counsel, I guess, to have to take remedial classes as well and not work on certain assignments that have to do with the NRA's financials and reporting those, because that's what he got in trouble for. But it also had a number of limitations. For instance, the court-appointed consultant wouldn't have access to the NRA's member list, which I think is a very key one. That's something people critical. Are deeply concerned about. Yep. Right, because the NRA's member list is private, and obviously people don't want the government necessarily to have that list of who are NRA members and who aren't.
Yeah, look what happened in California with that list. Yeah.
Right. So what do you make of this?
Like what happened with Brewer, and they just said, "Here's everybody's got a gun in California."
Yeah, the leak of the concealed carry.
Yeah, that was an intentional act I'm guessing by staff. Anyway,
well, there's no evidence of that, but some people have speculated that's the case. Certainly, there was a leak of the information.
Yeah, I was on that list.
Which we reported at the time.
Yeah.
But yeah, regardless, needless to say, NRA members do not want the government to have a list of all NRA members. I think that, if people want to say they're an NRA member, that's one thing, but most people do not want the government to have that list, right? That's
True.
a key point in all of this.
And that was one thing that I railed against as early on in the case too, that I did not want them to get the NRA's membership list, and they could have gotten it if, given our current financial situation, it's the last asset that's worth a bunch of money, is that list of names. And it shouldn't go anywhere.
And so how do you feel about what's in that proposal, the plan that the AG has put together? Are you comfortable with what's in there?
The first time I scanned through it, I emailed them back and said, that's interesting. And then they further clarified it today with Johnny, Jonny, his first name, the expert there, in response to the NRA's expert. And I thought that made a little sense too. And, the real question is, I think, will the NRA members like having a financial monitor so they know there's no financial abuse going on, which is the argument made by the Attorney General? Or will they just not do it because they just won't believe it because it's the Attorney General, somebody working for the AG that's gonna, I don't know. I thought that it was well thought through, and I laid some of my concerns. I'm not on board with it yet, and I don't know if I will be or not. I'm going to I want to see what the evidence is in this second phase, and then we'll figure out where to go.
Yeah. Do you have any concerns about how this consultant would be picked? From what the document lays out, it sounds like the NRA would nominate them, but the AG would, obviously the court would be the one who decides ultimately, but the AG would have a sort of veto power over who gets nominated. I haven't gotten that far into the
weeds on that yet. Right now, I'm just trying to get my stuff done so I can leave for 2 weeks. I have not gotten in at that tight yet. I'm going to be looking at it, though. I'll have plenty of time at night, to scan through this stuff. But I would say right now, if they ask me now, I'd say, no, we don't need a financial monitor. And Rocky raised a great point. We've got Mr. Hamblin and we've got Sonia Rawlings. And I do trust them both. Rocky didn't trust Sonia early on, but she has been so forthcoming with him. He's turned it around. And I believe that they will make the right decisions when they're there running the ship day to day. And I think that that it really will not be necessary with them at the helm. If we can just get rid of some of the corrupt, it'll be that much better too.
Okay, so you're saying you're actually against the appointment
at this point. I would say
by
no.
The court.
At this point, I would say no, but I have to say that they've moved my needle a little bit with those two filings.
Okay, so because that's one thing I was going to ask about. It seemed like maybe there's some dissension within the reformer ranks over this letter that you've sent.
I think everybody's universal. They don't want to trust the New York Attorney General, and you can't blame them for that. So, I think it's universal with all of us that right now we all oppose. Every board member opposes the financial monitor. And a lot of that, though, is still based on concerns that are allayed, I think, by those recent filings, but they're not aware of what they say.
Okay. And that's one thing I wanted to get at too, is when you did the filing to intervene in the bankruptcy in the federal case, you had several other board members come along with you for that. You didn't have anyone sign on to this letter with you. Why is that? Well,
I asked, there's only one other board member that can do that, and that's Rocky, because he was also found to be a 715B whistleblower complaint that they had violated on him. And, he's sitting there going, I don't want to spend 2 weeks in New York. I got a business to run. And, that's okay. So, he'll be there. He'll testify, and we'll see how it goes.
Okay. And then getting to maybe Sonia Rawling and some of the defense that the Brewer firm is offering up for the second phase of this trial. One, their overarching point hasn't really changed since the beginning of this, which they claim that the corruption that happened was cleaned up a long time ago, really before the AG's investigation even started. That's their central claim, and also that the investigation is what's actually harming the NRA. One of their filings that they've they put into the record shows the NRA at the end of 2023 had 3.898 million members, which was down from 5.2 million back in 2018. And they show a significant loss in revenue over that time period, both from the lack of membership and a decline in contributions as well. And their explanation for this is that the Attorney General's investigation itself is what's driving members away. I mean, maybe you can guess how you feel about this.
That's what they've been saying for a long time. Yeah. Yeah.
And so their solution for the judge is essentially to not do anything, that the NRA has already solved this issue and no further action from the court is necessary, despite what the jury found.
Yes, they are arguing safe harbor. There's a specific statute in the not-for-profit laws of the state of New York that says if they fix it all, the judge doesn't do anything. And that's what they're trying to convince him of. But the reality is that the culture of corruption is much deeper than just Wayne LaPierre, who they threw under the bus when it was expedient. You know, the reality is that it is many other individuals. And, you know, there's just not many people left in the building either. So, you know, it needs to be a little more. It needs to be a little more. Okay. I just don't know who for sure. I could name a couple names like Barr and Cotton, but other than that, I don't know what the judge's evidence is. You know, I don't know what he's seen. So it's really hard for me because I was sequestered in the first half of the trial. I would have loved to have been there in that courtroom, and I asked to do it. And they said, no, if you do that, you can't come back and testify. Okay, I'm out, you know, but I wanted to watch it. And if I had, I think I would have a little sharper perspective. And that's why I couldn't be specific as much as I wanted to be on the pleading for the motion to intervene.
Okay. And so, you know, what do you make of their argument that, and because Sonia Rawling put this forward, and so did was the top official at the Institute for Legislative Action, both argued this idea that it's the investigation itself that's driving away members. When pressed in the depositions that are included there, they don't give any sort of hard proof of that. They say, you know, that's what they've heard in conversations with members or in conversation with people who are responsible for membership. I believe the top fundraiser, his name slips my mind at the moment.
I want to say Tony. No. No. Okay. Anyway, I think I know who you're talking about.
Yeah. Regardless, this was a common theme in the filing that Brewer put in, and also from the experts that they hired, was this idea that it's really the investigation itself that is driving members away, and not, I guess, the corruption or things of that nature. Let
me say something about expert testimony. Yeah. All right. It's usually result-oriented crap. That's all if they go out and they search for, and this goes for both sides. If they go out and they search for an expert, they want to make sure they're going to get the answer they want to hear. And so if one expert isn't good enough, they go hire a different one. And they sit there and brief them of what they want and what they want them to look at and all that things. Then they write their paper up. And then they stand for cross-examination when they testify about their paper. So, it's pretty clear that they're both sets of experts are pushing their side's story.
Sure. But do you believe this is why people have left the NRA, the investigation itself? Or
no,
it has more to do
it's what the investigation told them. It's what the investigation told them that's driving them away. Okay. When they read about Wayne spending $250,000 in that money laundering scheme to get suits, they're going, that's what my $50 went for? A freaking suit or a second and a half on a Gulfstream flying to the Bahamas? Because that's $7,000 an hour to run a Gulfstream like that. They get upset about that. It's the facts. It's not the process that's got them upset.
Yeah. I think Rawling did also say, to be fair to her, that economics, inflation have probably also contributed to the decline in membership. But everyone seemed pretty adamant.
I don't buy that. I don't buy
that
that.
it
We're
was
going
the
into an
investigation
election year. I don't buy that. We're going into an election year when everybody's going to be freaking out about the Second Amendment here pretty quick, especially if Biden gets his stuff all in one place, to use not use quite the euphemism, but it looks like it's all up in the air right now, and I don't know which way this election is going to go. I have some gut feelings that they're not good. My gut feeling is this could be the worst cycle in my lifetime for Republicans, but we'll see. It's not, the polling's not turning out that way. Some things are turning. The whole issue on the presidency is going to be, is he too old?
Sure.
And but I think when you look at Congress and you look at the Senate, it's going to be more about abortion than is he too old.
Perhaps, although they just removed gun rights policy promises from the Republican platform, and maybe actually get into that a little bit.
I just asked a friend of mine that is a member of the Republican National Committee, and he said he didn't think so, and God, he hopes not.
Well, they did. I mean, the platform's out there. It doesn't have any policy promises at all for gun rights.
That's pretty scary.
It has a single line referencing the right to keep and bear arms and protecting it, but no policy promises like the previous platform did. And that actually kind of gets at the NRA has obviously been declining. That 3.8 million number from the Brewer filing, is further indication of that. And that's from last year. That doesn't, I don't know. Do you have any information on what the membership is at today in July?
Not today,
of 2024?
but the 3.8 is right along the lines of my predictions. We had an increasing rate of decline, both on finances and on membership. And, and the truth, when I found the truth back in the very end of 23, I think it was my last board meeting, I knew what was going on. And we went to that meeting and, in their officer statements, there's Willis Lee up there saying that 5 million members are all proud of this board and what they do here. And I'm listening to finance committee. I get up, I asked the question because I knew the answer. And I said, how many members do we have right now? And you know what? To a man, every one of them at the head table, including Wayne, said they did not know, because they could not bring themselves to tell the board the truth. They knew. There's no doubt in my mind that they knew. And, that got attention of a few board members. When I said, how many do we have? Because I knew we were down about 4.2 then. And, we're losing 1,000 members a day. That rate has remained basically constant. So if you go from 4.2 in 23 in January, and you put 1,000 members a day on there, that's another 365,000 that's lost. Oh, guess what? We're at 3.8 now. So they're also losing 50 grand a day, which is really scary because they don't have much left. Yeah.
And this decline, which was sort of I think the top line argument in your letter to the judge, that if the outcome of this case doesn't go the right way, that the NRA may not survive.
Right.
Doesn't that also speak, I suppose, to the gun rights movement's political power as a whole? I mean, I don't think the disappearance from the RNC platform is ancillary to all this. I think that's a direct result. I mean, the Political Victory Fund, the NRA's Political Action Committee, has had a very, very, very bad time this year raising money for the election. Back in 2016, obviously the NRA famously spent $35 million in support of Donald Trump, or opposed to Hillary Clinton, to help him win that election. Chris Cox, who was the head of ILA and the PVF at the time, the Political Victory Fund at the time, spoke at the RNC. As far as I'm aware, maybe better than I do and can correct me here, but there's nobody from the NRA speaking at the RNC in 2024, and all of their policy asks are now gone from the platform. Do you think these things are related, or am I stretching?
Let's go back to Politics 101, Stephen. And I know you've come to the GRPC several times, and I can remember getting up to GRPC when I was this
the
or
Gun
that.
Rights Policy
and
Conference.
the Gun Rights Policy Conference. And I got my 5 minutes up there before Julian got the crook and hooked me off the stage. And my theme was that we needed to do more to bring young people into the shooting sports, because if they learn the love the sport, they will learn the issue. And the reality is that politicians follow public opinion. Very seldom will a politician fall on his sword over an issue that is contrary to public opinion in his district. And if we don't maintain, and the public opinion was with us a lot better back in 20 years ago than it is now, and that essentially we have lost X, Y, and millennial generations because they're against us 2-1. And so the demographics are quite evident where we're going to be in the next 20 years. You know, all you got to do is go to a gun club meeting, go to your state rifle association meeting, and look around and see all the gray hair just like you and me. Although I've got a hell of a lot more than you do. And and realize that in 20 years, you know, the only thing the kids are going to know about firearms is Call of Duty.
Mm-hmm.
And they're going to say,
get
rid of those machine guns. Nobody needs a machine gun. You know, they don't understand the difference between a semi-auto and a full auto.
Do you think there's a direct connection between where things are at right now politically and the NRA's decline in particular?
Absolutely. There have been tons of polling out there that shows that we're slipping, that the sand is moving out from underneath our feet. And the politicians read those polls just as much as we do. And we should be learning from them and going out and recruiting and working on this next generation coming up and build a stop for the decline that's happening right now. You know, I'm a 4-H rifle and pistol instructor. I love working with the little kids. You know, I've done it for almost a decade. I haven't been able to do it the last couple of years because of all this stuff, but I miss those kids and I love watching them grow and compete and learn to love the sport. And that's what we've got to do with every grandkid that we've got out there, is get them on the range, get them safety training, make sure they understand the rules, and help them have a good time.
All right. Well, look, we appreciate you coming on the show and answering some of these questions about this filing or this letter that you sent to the judge. And we will absolutely be keeping on top of this as the second phase of the trial begins. And you know, I think what happens with the NRA is a lot more important for the gun rights movement than a lot of people give it credit for. So,
there's nothing's going to replace it. That's right. You're absolutely right there.
We are going to stay on top of this for sure, and appreciate you coming on. And I think we'll have to have you back on in the future as well. Thank you so much for the opportunity, Stephen. We'll see you in New York. All right. I'm going to go over to our message from myself, but about the Dispatch, our sponsor here at the end. Okay, it is time once again to talk about the Dispatch. We're doing a promo swap. We've been doing it for a little while now, and it's a pretty easy thing for me to get behind because I've been a paying subscriber at the Dispatch really since it launched, and I think it's one of the best publications out there, especially in your center right media, your conservative media, in large part because they focus, like we do here at the Reload, on hard news reporting first. That's what they were founded to do. That's where they put a lot of their energies. I read the Morning Dispatch every single day to keep up to date with what's going on in the country, in politics, and in news from a national perspective. And I would highly recommend it to anybody who's listening. There's a free trial if you follow the link in our bio here or down below in the description over at the Reload's website, or in the newsletter. You'll find the link to that free trial, so you can, not just take my word for it, but go and try out a subscription over there. You'll get access to all kinds of great original hard news reporting. That's their sort of bread and butter, I would say, especially stuff that, it's great to read the Morning Dispatch because it gives you a little bit of a different approach, a little bit of a different take on these stories that they're finding and that they're reporting, and they're gathering information, bringing it to you. And it just has a different editorial take as well. It's more for the politically homeless, for people like, I think there was 53% in the most recent Pew poll that wanted a different option than what they have in the current presidential election. So if you feel that way, I think you probably find yourself right at home over at the Dispatch. Of course, they have a big name and analysts and opinion writers there as well, who come from a center right perspective, people you've heard of before, I'm sure. Jonah Goldberg, Steve Hayes, Kevin Williamson, I'll pun if you've been deeply immersed in online media for the last 15 years, like I have. One of the best writers out there, and it continues on down the line. They've got a really great lineup of writers over there. Chris Steyerwalt's another really good one. It's just a fantastic publication. And this is actually getting long. I don't think I'm supposed to go on for this long, but it's easy to do that when I'm talking about Dispatch, because I have a lot of respect for what they've done. Another independent publication, startup. They've really had a great success, and I think they're the model for our industry, and also a place where you're going to find value if you go over and check them out. So, click the link, get your free trial, try them out for yourself. You don't have to take my word for it. But yeah, the Dispatch. Head over and check them out.